we've come up with 9 things. You can be a really good CA and a terrible PM, I think. I don't think it's the calendar that gives you the promotion. Attitude. Good old-fashioned work ethic.
Absolutely.
I was like, yes, pick up the phone. Why is no one picking up the phone anymore? What's wrong with these kids? And don't ask for a pay rise then. And that's that sort of attitude, isn't it? That sort of person that gets the promotion, that gets to the next level.
That's gumption.
Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Phil and Lauren podcast.
8 episodes.
It's almost Christmas.
It is.
Went to the supermarket yesterday and all the Christmas stuff's out. I'm like, November's only just started. What's going on?
Oh, we go straight from Halloween to Christmas these days. There's nothing in between.
Mm-hmm. Today's serious question, Lauren. What does it take to get promoted to project manager?
Oh, interesting one. Okay.
I thought it's a worthwhile one. I remember doing a video about 2-3 years ago about, what does it take for a CA to get promoted to a project manager, and it was quite a popular video at the time. We've been talking a lot about project management, and for good reason. I think it's because most people have that as their main goal. To get to project manager. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. So I think asking the question today, and for the viewers and listeners out there, I think let's make it clear that we're talking about in the context of typically your tier 3, lower tier 2, tier 3 space, where as often the CA that gets promoted to project manager. Tier 1 sometimes a bit differently. It works a bit differently if we're talking about project coordinator. In the tier 1 space, maybe a little bit different, but in the tier 3 space, maybe project coordinator, maybe CA. So I thought it'd be interesting to, let's say we working in a hypothetical scenario where we imagine a career review taking place. Okay. And let's imagine the managers or directors that's conducting the career review has already decided they're going to promote this person to project manager. Yep. And let's say this is an ideal scenario, unicorn sort of CA, everything is sort of perfect. From what I know and from what you know from having worked in the industry, and having asked many people what's most important and what makes a CA really good and where do they need to get to get that promotion, we've come up with 9 things that person would have done, or skills, attitude, all the rest of it.
It's a mind and body,
Let's say it's a career review where it's all high-fiving and backslapping. So we're going to talk about where this person would be. Okay. All right. So let's talk about, very briefly, fundamentally, what makes a really good CA, in your opinion? Well,
they have to be able to make money on the project and get it done on time.
Pretty much. Yeah. I think there's obviously many different things that go into it, but fundamentally a good CA is someone who can play a significant part in the profitability of the project, while at the same time build and maintain the relationships with the subcontractors, the consultants and the client. And that's difficult because those two things don't always go together.
It's true. It's difficult. And it's about time we gave the CA some love. I mean, we've done the PM episodes. We've done a project coordinator episode. But the CA seems very uniquely positioned to have that big impact on the project from both of those skill sets, from the contract space, but also from those relationships.
Yeah. Look, I think the CA plays a big part in whether the project is successful or not, not just financially, but on many levels. But, I think in certain markets, it's easier for CAs to pull money out of the project than other markets. I think at the moment, some subcontractors are maybe more hungry for work because the market's a bit slower. Yep. Not all of them. There's still shortages in many areas. But I think if a CA that burns subbies by looking for quick wins, then it's going to come and bite you at some point, especially when the market turns again.
Definitely.
So I think a really good CA is someone who can spin those plates and strike that sort of real balance between making money on the project, maximizing the profitability of the project whilst building those long-term relationships. And it's a real art form, I think.
It certainly is.
So let's talk about all the things that go into that. So I think if we think about this fictitious CA that we are promoting, that's maybe 5-6 years in, what would they have done and what are the key attributes? How did they get here from day one, right?
Yeah.
So point one, I think we put in here good old-fashioned work ethic.
Absolutely. I mean, it's true for everyone in construction, but certainly for the contract administrator.
Yeah, I think it's particularly in the first few years of your career, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's obviously a hard job. But I think this person who's sitting here that's getting promoted, they would have gone above and beyond to work really hard, not just for the project, but also for themselves.
Yeah, to get all those very specific skills that you need, particularly in the contracts part. I spoke to a CA who'd recently taken on the role, because we speak to dozens of people in preparation for the episode at all different levels of the industry. And he'd specifically taken a CA role on. He'd been a PC for a couple of years because he wanted to be a project manager. And I said, how are you finding the transition? He said, my head is spinning with all of the things that I have to learn. Because there's so much to learn about how to do a contract properly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to learn, and it's also, if you do it well, I think you need to go above and beyond by communicating, building relationships, managing systems, all those things. So there's certainly a lot. So don't think I want to spend too much time on this, but it probably goes without saying. You got to get from CA to PM, you simply just got to work hard. Yeah. You got to do the right things at the right time. You just got to work hard. Yeah. And if you don't, then you probably won't get there. I think if we talk about, often we use sports analogies in this context. Like if you want to play for the top AFL team, you have to simply just work hard. Yeah. So let's move on to point number 2. This is where differences in people really come in, and I think it's about good CAs have a real strong network of subcontractors, and they know those subcontractors, and those subcontractors know them. So it's about building relationships with the subcontractors in a way that you can potentially call in favours when you need to call in favours. Yeah. And simply just getting return phone calls in busy markets, which a lot of people often, when we have these conversations, voice their frustrations because they're reaching out to subbies, and the procurement process can be quite difficult if you're not getting return phone calls because I've either burnt them in the past or you don't have the relationship.
Yeah, that's right. And if you're going to have to, as you said, ask for favours, well, it's always easier to ask a favour from someone that you're friendly with. I need it done at this time, or I really need it done at this price. That takes strong relationships to get that buy-in. Yeah. So often when we go through interview processes for mid to senior level CAs, this will no doubt often comes up in the interview where people ask, who's the subbies do you know, who do you use, who do you trust, who do you rate? And sometimes the builders then go and talk to the subbies as references for the CAs. Yes, something that some CAs might not expect. Yeah. But it's a usually very candid reference. Yeah. I mean, subbies are mostly not backwards going forwards. They'll tell it exactly how it is. So then, how do you build those relationships? That's something that we've been talking a lot about recently, and I remember we posted this little picture on LinkedIn the other day with the cat and the telephone, and it just simply said, CAs, pick up the phone and call your subbies, or step away from the email and call your subbies. Yeah. That's a really touchy subject at the moment, seemingly, by the sounds of it, because there's this group of people, maybe the older people, when you talk about this, everyone's like, yes, pick up the phone. Why is no one picking up the phone anymore? What's wrong with these kids? But it's also, is it efficient to use the phone? I think it's really valuable to know when to use the phone and when not to use the phone. True.
It's about building relationships with subcontractors. You can't do that over email.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Nor can you get immediate answers that you need. You're much likely to get someone on a practical level just picking up the phone than checking their email and answering it when they have time.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to a real focus on attitude as well. It's like you have to want to build relationships with these subcontractors and actually invest time and energy and effort in doing it and honing those soft skills as we always talk about. Yeah,
which is, arguably one of the most important skills in construction, even though it may be one of the least obvious.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's about tailoring your communication style to get buy-in from the subbies. So, as the more experienced you get, the more you know how to communicate with certain people, individuals and groups of people to get the best outcomes. All right. So if we move on to the next one.
Well, look, we've got, the third point. We've sort of talked work ethic and we've talked, building relationships. But what about actually understanding buildability as a third thing?
Yeah, that's what did someone say to you the other day? CAs have to remember.
They're not a finance professional, they are a construction professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though the role is about, in many ways, it's about making money, keeping it on time, you can do that best by understanding construction fundamentals.
I think in the bigger builders where often it becomes the contract administration piece is sort of split off, and it can often in certain places become a really procurement-focused role, where it is almost like a finance/lawyer type role. But in that tier 3 space, you got to get out on site, you got to get your buildability hat on and really learn the processes. And that's a frustration, I think, from a lot of site managers that we talk with and certain project managers as well, that they feel like a lot of the younger CAs lack that buildability with the way that people are being brought in the industry these days. And there's positives and negatives as well to how people are entering the industry today versus 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but there's just a whole bunch of practical things you are not going to know will and won't work if you don't understand how a building site works.
Yeah. But I think this comes down to, again, like we always talk about, attitude. How do you know buildability? Well, I think it's probably just it's just you need to want to learn it.
Yeah, it's taking the initiative to get out there and visit the site, even if it's not directly part of your role. I mean, there are many, many CAs that are office-based that aren't expected necessarily to spend time on site, but understanding, despite the plethora of paperwork and calls that there are to be done, that getting out there on site helps you do your job better.
I think it's getting out on site in a way that you are driving your own learning and development by, number one, if you're not site-based, pushing to be on site when you need to be and when you can be. But there's no point just going on site because Wednesdays is your site day and then you just sit in the site office and behind your computer. I think it's really having that curiosity and hunger to learn, to talk to the site manager and the project manager and the subbies on site and looking around and go, how does that work? And ask the questions and sort of building the process in your head and filling in the gaps that you can see that you still don't really understand by asking question after question to a variety of people. And then that's how you'll build understanding. But I think that has to be driven from the individual, from the attitude and the curiosity and the hunger to learn, rather than just being on site, because just being on site, who was that, remember that PC that you spoke with that is actually on a building site, and what did they say?
They'll stick their head out every now and then. Yeah,
well, that's not going to teach you buildability, is it?
No.
So it's I think, and people might correct me, might say I'm wrong, but I think it's more getting really good at buildability. I think it's more of an attitude thing rather than a technical thing in the context of a CA, because some people are going to be more technically minded than others, and some people will pick it up easier than others. But I think if you really, even if you're not as technically minded as the next person, if you're really driving to want to pick it up, you'll get there faster.
I think it is one of those things that will really distinguish that top performer. We're talking about in this episode, the top performer who can understand the nuances of things and the subtleties of things, and someone who just knows how to do a tight contract but not necessarily able to really hone in on what could make it better.
And especially if you're working for a builder that's design and construct, or has got a lot of design and construct influence, where we talk about value engineering, all this sort of stuff. You can say, I would imagine the differences that you can make by understanding buildability, having a proactive approach, and if there's a design team working closely with that design team to come up with more innovative solutions to solve problems that inevitably comes up, and be able to have the conversations with your subbies when you're doing variations or even at the front end procurement phase. I think that's where the money is made lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Buildability, so that's the one that you can't go past. And I also think coming on programming, I think that really ties in with, if you want to be a PM, when we spoke about our last episode, what makes an exceptional PM, how many people mentioned to us programming?
Absolutely.
So I don't think you can program if you don't have a really strong base knowledge of, not a base, but a really strong knowledge of buildability.
Yeah, they won't work otherwise.
Sense of urgency. What do you think of that one?
Look, it's important to understand what is urgent and what is not, and where the time needs to be spent at the time.
Yeah, I think when we've been asking directors and senior people, as we always do, what makes an exceptional CA, and multiple people mentioned getting the letting out the way early on.
Yep.
Especially in the first 3 months, a couple of people have said really good CAs are the ones that can get all of the letting out the way in the first phase of the project. So I think the project obviously ebb and flows. At the front end, it's always the beginning part and end part's probably always the busiest times. But I think it's knowing when to really push hard, when to work hard, when to go the extra mile, and when things are critical and urgent. And focusing on those things that makes a difference.
Well, it's the delays that you're wanting to avoid by getting it all done in advance and getting it all done quickly, because what you don't want to do is still be looking for a subby to do a particular job and everything else is held up because of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's where your pricing starts to blow out as well, and then it starts eating into your margin. So I think the good CAs, and it comes down to that ownership piece that we spoke about in so much detail in the last episode. I think if you, through this whole process, or this whole everything we're talking about, if you take ownership and you're sort of thinking ahead and planning ahead and go, your urgency is driven by you thinking 10 steps ahead, because if you don't get this done this week, then it's going to be incredibly hard from here on in. And I think the really good people that get the promotions are the ones that take early on in their career the initiative and take the time to think about these things without necessarily being told all the time.
And the people that learn from experience, because it's experience that will teach you what really is urgent, because something goes wrong or because it could have been done better. Taking the time to learn from that experience will show you basically where the time needs to be spent.
There's been so many times where I've asked, had these conversations with senior people, and one of the big frustrations is when graduates or people in their first year or two sit behind a desk and they've completed the task that they were given, and then they just sit there and wait for the next thing to be handed to them to do, and that's where your career starts to not progress, because that comes down as, again, it's an attitude thing. So it's about, I think, really thinking what needs to happen next for the project to move forward.
Yeah, and what might I need to go and become aware of because it could become urgent.
And if you do that, then your understanding of the critical path of the project will no doubt become much clearer, much faster, and that will then tie into programming, buildability, like all these things link really closely together. So sense of urgency, knowing when to push, knowing when to perhaps be a bit more patient.
Yeah. And look at some of these things, as we move through our list, some of these things are perhaps more base level than others, and some of them are the really key things that separate the good CAs from the great ones.
Yeah. Mastering the art of emotional intelligence.
See, now this is an important one. And again, not one that necessarily people think about straight away.
In my humble opinion, I think it's the most important one. This is the soft skills that we always talk about, that very difficult to teach.
Yeah.
In my opinion, more difficult to learn and teach if you don't have it than technical skills.
Agreed.
So we talk about building, this ties into that relationship with the subcontractors, talks in with relationships with your clients. Now some builders would allow the CAs to build those really close relationships with clients. Some will keep certain people a bit more at arm's length, as traditionally the PM's job from what I know, but no doubt the CA would start to have involvement in the client. So
you would want to, so that you can build that skill yourself for that career goal.
And that's where the self-awareness attitude comes in, managing emotions, especially when I was talking to a senior PM the other day and asking the question, what makes a really good CA? And he said, especially when the market's tough, and when economy is tough, and when we read in the newspapers about all the builders and contractors going bankrupt, he said sometimes you have to deliver bad news to a subcontractor, and that subcontractor it's a family business, and the news that you deliver to them is going to impact them directly, personally. That's difficult. Very difficult, I think, to do, and to keep your own emotions in check. And I think it's a real art to learn to do what you need to do, and then show the appropriate level of empathy that goes with that. Yeah,
because sometimes you have to be tough. You have to be, I need it done at this date. This is the date that we agreed. But other times, if someone else is doing it tough, you have to be able to acknowledge that, and you have to be able to communicate in that way that invites them to at least tell you. So one of the very experienced CAs that I spoke to about this episode, she gave me a really interesting example of this in terms of the building relationships and the communication. And she talked about knowing the subbies, knowing where their finances were at. But if you don't have the relationship with them, that they can tell you when they're in trouble, then actually that's trouble for the project. So the example she gave was that she was working with a particular subcontractor that was doing it tough at the time, and just in terms of cash flow. But fortunately, she had the relationship with them that they picked up the phone and said, "Look, we're having a cash flow problem at the moment. Can we sort this out between us?" And the company bought the materials for the job in advance, paid for the materials in advance to keep the subby afloat and to keep the project running on time. But she had to have that relationship with them for them to be able to say, we're in trouble. I trust you to help me out.
And this comes back to that, the importance of speaking to people over the phone, meeting them face to face, because if you just been exchanging emails, that'll be much harder for a subby to get in touch with you and go, hey, we're actually in real trouble here. So I think that's a key thing. And often I think when people go into the job potentially early in their career, they don't always think about it and understand the real importance of it. We talk about the title as contract administrator. But it's not really, it's an administration job, but it's also very much not an administration job.
Yeah, and I think maybe young people who don't want to be taken for a ride, and I think that is probably the first concern of a young contract administrator is that, I have to be tough with my negotiating or someone will take advantage of me. They have to really subtly learn, yes, that is an important skill, but also I need to be I need to be intelligent about how I deal with the people, and even when it's tough, I have to be, thoughtful and monitor that relationship as well. So, again, another thing that separates the good from the great.
And that's where that's where a lot of the money is made on the project, where the project can become profitable because you're able to get things done or do deals that you wouldn't otherwise do. So in that context, it's almost more akin to a sales job than a administration job or a legal job. So it's a tough one, isn't it? You have to almost have to be a salesman, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be an accountant, and you have to be a builder.
Yeah.
And that sets the foundations for, and you have to be a leader as well. We'll get to that in a minute, especially when you've got more junior people in your team. Then we get to systems and organisation. This is something that is becoming, with every passing year, more and more important, where we are relying more and more on systems. I think you spoke to someone that went from a smaller builder that was kind of loose and fast with how they ran things to a more structured, well-known builder that really rely on systems, and they had a bit of an adjustment period.
Oh, absolutely. And, small organisations can run quite loosely, I guess, and we hear the same kind of experiences of people moving into that upper tier space as well. But he talked about the fact that things had been, quite loose in the smaller builder, and then when he moved sort of up into the tier 3 space, his first project manager was very systems oriented, and it was a real challenge to begin with. And fortunately, he had that hunger to learn, and realised very quickly that he wasn't meeting expectations initially, and he needed to ask, how would you like these things done? And not only did he learn the systems, he learnt to love them. Now he's one of those really organised senior CAs who knows exactly what the PM wants. And if he doesn't, he communicates it really well. But, systems can be your saviour, and that's what he learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think for me, I've never used, we use lots of systems, and I've used lots of systems and different softwares and things over my time, but never JobPack or CheOps or any of these systems. But I would imagine that they are not that difficult to use. So I think when people are lacking in their systems or ability on systems, to me, again, I think it's more of an attitude thing.
Yeah.
Perhaps a lack of diligence rather than a lack of knowledge on systems. I don't think anyone can say these days, oh look, I didn't put that on a system because I didn't know how to use it. These systems become, with every passing year, I'm sure they become easier to use. Like all these systems, processes and procedures are, like even with the with safety, Hammer Tech is evolved and has become kind of the industry standard. So it makes it all easier, but it's having, again, the attitude, the commitment to your project and your team and to your career and to yourself to do things when they need to be done, and really become systems orientated. And
you can learn that. If you don't feel like you're one of those naturally organised people, you can learn it because the CA did.
Yeah.
And learn to love it.
Yeah. Detail orientated. I think this is a big one when it comes to contracts, scopes of works, and again, a lot of money either are made or lost. I think when you within the detail and the fine print.
And this is where we had all of the really interesting stories of people and how, as awful as it sounds, the subbies will try to wiggle their way into less for more or more for less. I remember one CA telling me, unless you're really tight on the contract about exactly what you expect, you can have conversations like, oh no, that quote is for one wall, it's not for all the walls in the office fit out that you're doing. And even though you might go back and say, well, that is patently ridiculous, why would I only be putting one wall in? If it is not in there so specifically, there's wiggle room, and then you end up having to renegotiate something and pay a little bit more, and often that's worthwhile just to make sure that it gets done. But again, you're over budget and you've wasted time renegotiating something.
Yeah. I think there's a lot in this detail, but there's paying attention to detail at all levels. There's paying attention to detail and making sure that you use your systems correctly. There's paying attention in detail and making sure how you communicate to everyone in the, everyone in your and the all the stakeholders of the project, having those phone conversations, and then making sure that you're sending emails detailing what needs to be confirmed, and so that there's a paper trail of it always when things go wrong. But then there's the detail and the contracts, and this is where one of the reasons I think where you don't see a lot of crossover between people that work in the volume housing or residential sector, because there's detail there, but when it comes to contracts, it's often just purchase orders. And the commercial sector is so diverse, and every project is different, and every subcontractor can be different, and the way that they might be able to want to try and either get away with things or do things. So that comes down to your relationships. If you've got good relationships and standing relationships with subcontractors that you've used for a long time, they're probably less likely to try and pull a fast one on you, because that will burn the relationship. But it's about, again, attitude with being diligent. Sit there and read through all the contracts, read through all the documentation, which I'm sure is mind-numbingly boring and probably very monotonous. And I'm sure when you're reading all of this line for line worth of text, it's then easy to probably lose focus and then getting halfway down the page and then skimming to the bottom. It's the same as the project coordinator that I spoke with that did a lot of defects on a high-rise apartment job. It's like, when you get to apartment 43, you want to poke needles in your eyes because you've been doing the same thing repetitive. So, but he said, repetitive things so over and over. But his point was that's where you start to make the difference, where you have to check yourself, knuckle down and go, no, I can't let slip here. I can't let the monotony get to me. I need to stay focused and do my job. And I'm sure that's what it's like, especially in that letting stage, the first 3 months, when that urgency and getting all the letting done, where you really need to be diligent on your contracts. And again, I think it's an attitude thing, it's a character thing, it's a values thing, as what sort of individual are you, rather than just purely having the skill to do it or not.
You have to really want to learn to do it well, to take the time and motivate yourself to pay attention to all of the details. And one of the best stories I learned, and it stays in my mind, I actually heard it about a year ago when I was researching something else and trying to get some advice for some grads that I was working with. There was one CA that really stuck in my mind, and he said what he used to do to learn contracts was look at who in the office was considered the gun, and go and look at their contracts. Like in his own time, he would go and have a look at how they set it up, how they worded it, and then use and borrow and be inspired by that. And that's gumption.
And that's that sort of attitude, isn't it? That sort of person that gets the promotion, that gets to the next level, because no one. That's not necessarily a requirement that's going to be forced on you. If you're doing a job well, no one notices you doing the extra mile or not. Alrighty, so what have we got next? Proactive in learning and development, and this is again comes down to attitude. Like one of the big things that came up when I did this video 3 years ago, when I asked the question who gets promoted and who don't. I said it's those CAs where at the right time starting to put their hand up and ask and say, hey, I've noticed that we are setting this project up in a certain way. We're doing all the fit outs in the retail sector at the bottom of the apartment building. I want to try and give me a go. I want to run that part of it as a PM. Or there's a small building at a part of a project. Can I run that as a PM? Yeah. Or I've noticed we're doing this small project as a love job for a client that's only $1 million or whatever it is. Can I run that as a project manager? Give me a go. I feel I can do it. Give me enough rope so that I don't quite hang myself, but give me some rope. And that is often not something that gets offered on a silver platter to everyone, because everyone is busy, and that thought may have not crossed the construction manager or the director's mind. But if you put your hand up for it, maybe they say no, But then you ask again next time. You keep banging on the door, and eventually it'll open.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people don't ask for what they want, and it's probably the fastest way to get to where you want.
People will ask in career reviews for promotions. They'll ask for titles and pay rises, but not many will ask for these opportunities.
Yeah, the chance to prove you're worth it.
And if there's one thing that you can do to get ahead, is to ask for opportunities like that when they come up, where you can be put in a position of stepping up your skill level, stepping up more responsibility and having more authority in an environment where it's still controlled, where it's not make or break, and sort of figure out a way to make it work within the team. And don't ask for a pay rise then or a title, just do it because you want to learn. Yeah.
And I think what you've just said there is one of the most important conversations you have with everyone, that's looking to take that next step in construction, whether it's a graduate or whether it's the CA looking to move to CM PM, is do it because you want to learn. Focus on the learning.
How many people are there that wants to ask for a promotion simply because enough time has passed?
Yeah.
I don't think it's the calendar that gives you the promotion. It is what you can deliver and what you've learned, and how confident are they that if we hand you this promotion and give you a project as a PM, that you're going to be able to bring it home.
And have you made yourself so indispensable and proven yourself so much that they really want to?
Yeah, and I think... And it's that attitude of wanting to be proactive about learning, asking questions, talking to the site managers, talking to the engineers, being proactive about learning the buildability piece by getting out there, understanding it, wanting to figure it out, learning the contracts, like you said, going to talk to the smart people on contracts. Maybe there's a contracts manager, maybe there's someone that is really good at the contract, spending time with them, knowing your subcontractors, all of that, all these pieces that has to fit together to make this really good CA that's ready for promotion. I think all of those things you're going to have to learn by actually pushing for it yourself.
Yeah, having that curiosity.
No graduate program is going to teach you all of these things to this level where it's going to take you to the next
No, if you just go along with a program, you'll never stand out anyway. But it's like that same curiosity that drives the young CA to get on site is the same curiosity that drives the more experienced CA to ask for the packages, because I want to see how I'll go. I want to see what it's like to run it myself. Or to go, hey, I want to learn more about, sustainability is a big thing in the industry at the moment, and health and safety, and all of these things that are consistently changing and developing. Again, it's another way to stand out, and in this ideal career review, probably something that this person has done.
You're asking the senior CA to sit down and see how they run the mechanical package or the structure package or the civil package that you haven't done before, or you go and ask the project manager to sit in with him doing the programming for the next project.
I mean, your PM has to be someone that has had a lot of experience so that they can deal with the problems that rise up. And in fact, I know a contracts manager whose favourite thing to do is sit in a meeting with contract administrators and sort of play devil's advocate the whole time. Play like, if this doesn't work, what will you do? And if this doesn't work, and how could we do it better? And what if we need it to be bigger than that? Just to see who's got the curiosity and who's done the extra mile. And that, he said, that's the person that he mentors.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we better start wrapping up. Next one, the last one, is leadership skills. If you want to be a project manager, that goes without saying, you got to be a good leader.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's about having demonstrated that leadership skills already through your journey as a contract administrator. And there's many different ways and to do that, many different facets to leadership.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's that technical leadership which we've been talking about, getting it right, having learnt from experience, and even mentoring someone else in that technical aspect of how to write a good contract. That's important leadership.
Yeah, I think it's showing that you pay attention to junior people, junior staff, to, being proactive about assisting them and helping people in the team. And maybe through your career, you would have put your hand up and said, hey, I noticed that you've just hired Bob, He's the PM seems to be pretty busy. He's got 58 questions a day. Would you like me to be a mentor to him, or ask to be put your hand up to be a mentor to other people in the business? But then, most importantly, I think it's leadership is about earning respect from your team. Being there when things go wrong, taking accountability and responsibility for your mistakes, going the extra mile when when the chips are down and things are really, are tough on projects. First one in, last one, first in the office, last in the office, really pulling your weight, going the extra mile to solve problems. That's how you earn respect ultimately.
And I think if you don't do it when you don't have that leadership title, then what makes anyone think you would when you do?
Yeah, and again, that whole thing that we mentioned in our last episode as well. You can't be sort of a clown in the office and on a Monday and then ask for a promotion. So it'd be very hard for people in the business to promote you if they know that you don't have the respect of your team. Yeah.
Or if they know that you're going to be too loose with the team, not be able to have tough conversations. And that
all comes with that emotional intelligence piece. Yeah. And then finally, I think it's also worthwhile acknowledging if you can be a really good CA and a terrible PM. I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think everyone needs to become a project manager or should become a project manager. Yeah. I think there are people that take other roles, contracts managers, commercial managers. It's traditionally a role that's in the upper tier space, but we're starting to see more and more of them in the lower tier space. There's many different avenues, and I don't think if you, in your heart of hearts, not everyone is a leader. Not everyone, and that's not a bad thing. No, it's not a bad thing if you don't have the personality or leadership skills, or if you don't enjoy being a leader. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah. I think it's being honest with yourself at what you're good at. You could be really good at contracts. You could be really good at all of the things that we discussed, but just PM's not for you, and that's okay too.
Maybe you don't want to have to tell people when they're doing things wrong all the time, and you're just happy to see the project come up and feel like you've contributed to it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, so we recap it quickly. 9 things that makes the perfect CA ready for promotion. Strong work. I'm going to have to read this because I'm going to remember them. Strong work ethic. Ability to build a strong subcontractor network. Yeah. That's not just knowledge, but there's strong relationships there. Knowing your buildability, strong technical skills, strong not just theoretical, but good buildability knowledge on site. A sense of urgency when it counts. Really strong emotional intelligence skills, or social skills, leadership skills.
Self-management skills.
Highly organised, very systems orientated. Detail orientated, especially around contracts, scopes of works, invoices, all those things. Shown to be proactive in your learning, always push yourself to learn more, and taking the accountability on that yourself, and strong leadership skills.
This is a really well-rounded CA we're talking about here. They really deserve their promotion.
They sure do. Thanks for listening.